Hey, it's Jay, and welcome back to part 2 of making a delicious homemade beer. My wife and I just made a Kolsch brew that'll be ready in about 4 weeks. Almost 2 weeks ago, Craig and I took you through the brewing process.
We want this yeast to be kind of munching on all the sugars that we extract from the grains. If you have wild yeast or bacteria that get in there, can kind of make your beer taste funky and give it off flavors.
Man, I miss Craig. I could sit in for Craig. What? Are you kidding me? What are you doing today? I'm going to be teaching everybody what happens after the brewing process, when the fermenting process starts to the end.
Well, where's your home brew?
Yeah. Well, it's like 10 o'clock in the morning.
You're breaking your own rule from part 1.
It's fine. Whatever. All right. Just get out of here. Get out of here.
Okay.
All right, sorry. Let's just get started today. Hefeweizens ferment at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, so because of the warmer temperature, the yeast is most active in the first 3 days. You can see it left behind up on the side. There's an entire line around the rim of the carboy. The yeast is still active though. You can still see carbon dioxide bubbles popping up through the airlock. Today we're on day 9 of the fermentation, and it's just really stopped bubbling. Usually on day 7 to day 10, I'll switch my primary fermentation vessel, it's called a primary, over to a secondary, and what that helps is the clarity of the beer. But because Hefeweizen is a cloudy beer, and we don't want to get rid of all the suspended yeast because that's part of the actual beer, we're gonna leave it in the primary for at least 5 more days. Let me show you what I did with this fridge to set it up. This is my freezer that I converted into a refrigerator. It's a Magic Chef. I got it from Home Depot, probably for about $120 on sale. You can see there's the Hefeweizen in there. It's looking pretty good. So it's still bubbling a little bit on top, so it's still fermenting slightly. Here are my contents for the next brew. But the big thing is when I ordered this, it came as a freezer. And so if you plug it into the wall, it'll work as a freezer, and sometimes around Thanksgiving we actually convert it back into a freezer and just plug it directly into the wall. But what I did was I added this piece here, and you can purchase this on Amazon for I think about $35. It's an Inkbird temperature regulator, and what we're going to do is reset this today. So you hold the set button down, and it starts flashing, and then you're able to just bring the temperature to what you like, and we're going to set it at 62. Alright, you can hear it kick on. The freezer itself plugs into this temperature regulator, and then the temperature regulator plugs into the wall, and it just regulates the electricity flow. So if it gets too cold or too hot, it'll kick on the compressor. We have another wire that comes into this, and I could have just left the wire in the freezer itself, but since the specific heat of water is so much greater than air, to control the temperature better, I just have a cup of water in here. Because I have this fridge open right now, the temperature of the water is not going to change much, and therefore it'll keep the freezer the same temperature more consistently. Altogether, between the freezer and this, I spent about $150 to $160, which is much cheaper than spending $500 on a kegerator, you know, with a tap and all that. I just pulled this Hefeweizen out of the fridge, and we're on day 13 of the fermentation right now. Normally I would let this go 14 to 21 days, but because I'm brewing Kolsch today, I'm gonna move it actually to the keg it's gonna be in. We're gonna just do it a day early, which is fine. The one thing I will check is I'll check the final gravity and just make sure that all the beer has converted, but Hefeweizen yeast goes through the process pretty quickly, so we saw the most active fermentation in the first few days. The warmer the temperature, the more active the yeast gets. The Kolsch, on the other hand, we're gonna set the fridge to 58 in a minute. The Kolsch will go in there and start its 4-week fermentation process. But that's gonna start at 58, then it goes to 52 after a week, and then we crash it down into the 30s. Meanwhile, the Hefeweizen is gonna be in the keg. We are gonna carbonate it, which is going to require a pretty high PSI because the fridge is going to be set to 58 degrees. But as the Kolsch matures in its fermentation process, then we'll be able to crash the temperature down, and this Hefeweizen will be nice and chilled at like a 38 degree Fahrenheit temperature. We're going to siphon this over into the keg. I'm actually going to ask my wife to come help with the hydrometer process. But when you siphon, you want to make sure that all your equipment is sanitized very well. We're going to take off this airlock. I'm going to always keep one hand up here because on the bottom of the carboy is a yeast cake. You can actually reuse that yeast if you want. I usually don't because I had one batch go really bad when I tried to reuse it. Make sure that this yeast cake on the bottom doesn't go up and into your beer. I'm just gonna start siphoning this. I just need to do a couple of pumps. And there we go, we're flowing. I'm gonna have my wife just take a quick little sample so we can taste it for one, and then two, we'll get a final gravity just to see where we are. Alright, hopefully you can read it through.
Actually, 1.012.
0.012. Okay, so the gravity dropped quite a bit. We started at 1.049 after the correction was made for the temperature, and now we're at 1.012. You want to try it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Smells really good.
Remember, it's not carbonated yet.
It tastes good.
It's good. It'll sweeten with the carbonation.
Okay.
Yeah? I promise. It'll be good. I'm being really careful with the siphoning hose, making sure I don't go too far down to get into that yeast cake. Okay, I'd say that's about it. Smells good. And there's the payoff, a full keg. I've sanitized the lid for this thing. And basically just put it in sideways, twist it, and then push it down, and this thing is sealed up now. There it is, it's locked. Hey Caleb! Yeah, it's an airplane. And look, there's the boil of the Kolsch brew. It's got about 15 minutes left. The Kolsch is going to be set at 58 degrees to start, so we're just going to get this cooled off a little bit right now. Set. There we go. Compressor just went on. Now for the CO2 on the Hefeweizen. Before I hook up my keg to the CO2 canister, what I want to do first is sanitize the hose, the connecting hoses that are going to be possibly touching the beer. I'm gonna be using the red hose on this one. I'm actually set up to do two hoses. I could do one here, and I've got the regulator just acts for both. So I kind of have to have them at the same pressure, but I have a valve here that shuts this one off. So when I only have one beer, I use this red hose here on this side. There's an in and an out on this torpedo keg. I pump CO2 in the out first when I'm force carbonating. The out actually is all the way at the bottom, and the in valve is up here at the top. So if you pump in through the bottom, what ends up happening is carbon dioxide goes all the way down to the bottom of the keg, and then it bubbles up through the beer. Then what I'm gonna do is just release the valve a little bit. There's actually a little pressure in there already, but I'm just gonna release this valve, and what that's gonna do is get all the extra oxygen out there. And remember, we said you wanna get rid of the oxygen so that we can stop any yeast that's in the beer from working still. Let's get that hooked up. Ooh. Ooh. All right. I was trying to ease it in, but you know, whatever. It rushed in there, and I'm just gonna release a little bit here. Okay, now it sounds like it's filled up and it's done, but if I shake it a little bit, you can hear more CO2 go in. We should need about 25 pounds of pressure on the gauge here in order to carbonate at 58 degrees. In 1 week from now, I'll probably adjust this dial a little bit so that I can decrease the pressure, because as it gets colder, you don't need quite as much pressure on the gauge. So right now I'm just shaking, shaking, shaking. And the pressure is really building up inside here. Let's see if we can release a little bit. Instead of having any air in here, we're gonna be filled with just CO2. So I feel like we've gotten the air out now. I'm gonna turn it aside, and what you do is just rock the keg back and forth. I feel like that's pretty good for now. I'll probably do this process once or twice more in the next day. Once everything is set up, I'll have 2 kegs in here, so the carb oil will be replaced by this second keg, which will be this Kolsch. This will be ready in 2 days from now. All right, it's finally here, the last day. Today's the day we're gonna tap the keg and we're gonna taste the beer. I have all my equipment here soaking in a nice warm Star San bath. This is just all the tap equipment that we're gonna use to tap the keg and try it out. All right, there's our beer from 2 days ago that we made, and it still hasn't really started to come alive yet, and that's because this beer ferments at a cooler temperature, so it takes a little bit longer for the yeast to really kick into action. So we're gonna pull all this out so I can rock the keg one more time. I made my lines long enough so that I can actually pull one item out at a time. I just removed this hose and put it in the sanitation solution since I have a bucket ready to go. Might as well sanitize and get this one ready for the Kolsch in a couple weeks. The one thing that I want to do is I'm going to lower the pressure here. I've had it under high pressure for 2 days. If I have it too high, then everything's going to be foamy when I drink. Here's the problem. If I put this on and then I open it up and then I try to lower the pressure here, then the pressure inside the keg is so high that it's gonna push right through the hose and back up into my tank, which I don't want. So I'm going to first release some pressure in here. Then I'll hook this up. This will now be down lower than this. So when I decrease the pressure in here, then the pressure in this tank will still be greater than the pressure in the keg. I think we're ready to put this line in. There we go, connect it in. And I'm gonna turn the pressure on. Okay, and it went up to about 22 pounds per square inch. Attach this. Wow, immediately filled the line. We set this to 25 PSI, but for the last couple of days, this has been around 35 PSI. So, and I also just moved this keg around quite a bit. So I imagine that there's gonna be a lot of commotion going on inside the keg. We're not gonna get a clean pour. It's gonna take a few pours to actually get a clean pour. So let's give it a shot. Here we go. We'll let that settle for a second and we'll be right back. Actually, it looks almost like nitrogen instead of carbon dioxide because the bubbles are so small. It's because it was under such high pressure. All right, we'll let that settle and then we'll give it a taste in a minute. We've given it a few minutes and it's settled out, and we'll give it a shot. Remember, I've only got this set at 58 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's a little warm, but we're gonna give it a try. Oh, it's really good. It's gonna be good. I can taste that it's still young, but it's not bitter. It's sweet. It's got a good fullness, a good body. It's gonna be a really good one. Dana, we gotta chill this and get it going.
Sounds good.
Please leave a comment below, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe. Until the next brew.